almost every piece of plastic ever made is still on the planet in some form or another. Plastic production globally this year is expected to be more than 300 million tonnes.
Half of which we'll use just once and then throw away. By 2050, when the population explodes to almost 10 billion people, it's expected that plastic production will triple. The problem with that is that today only a fraction of the plastic that we produce is recycled. The rest ends up in our environment, and it's coating our lands and our oceans like a disease.
Garbage thrown away in the United States can make its way to Antarctica. Plastic in our coastal waters is pulled into the centre of massive wind-driven, churning circular gyres. There are many other ocean currents also diverting the trash all around the surface of the ocean. In reality, it's just one ocean with no boundaries.
Plastic is everywhere in our ocean, floating on the surface, mixing in the salt water, and sitting on the ocean bottom, miles and miles deep. And once in the ocean, it never goes away. Over hundreds of years, it breaks down into small pieces. But those pieces, even the tiny ones called microplastics, are still plastic.
Plastic is non-biodegradable. Every year, about 8 million tons of plastic ends up in our oceans, which is equal to 5 bags filled with plastic going along every foot of coastline in the world, according to Plastic Oceans, a nonprofit organization. By 2025, they estimate the annual input will be about twice that. But how exactly does so much plastic and waste end up in our waters? And what happens to that plastic once it's swept away by the ocean's currents? Let's use a plastic bag to illustrate this. This is just one of the many scenarios of how plastic could end up in our waters. After throwing out your plastic grocery bag, it ends up in a landfill and can be swept away by the wind, landing in a river which flows out to sea. The ocean currents may push the plastic bag to a gyre. Think of them like large, slow-moving whirlpools in the ocean. When garbage enters a gyre, it's slowly pulled into the center where they form a huge garbage patch. And while the plastic bag gets sucked in, it breaks down into thousands of floating pieces, adding to the accumulation of trash.
Oceans essentially act as a giant kitchen sink, where because of the way that the wind moves in the tropics and in the subtropics, the ocean's currents start spiraling inward. And as they spiral inward, they take the plastic with them into the center of what's called the gyres in the ocean.
There are at least 4 other garbage patches like this in the world. And after scientists discovered them, starting in the 90s, they thought that this might be where a lot of the plastic ended up, out there, floating on the surface.
Dispersed almost everywhere, but concentrating in huge swaths in the midst of global currents, breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces, ingested by species across the marine world, and sinking to the bottom of the sea.
Unfortunately, there isn't anything to actually take those chemical compounds apart. So they persist for an indefinite period of time, and we really have no idea how long it takes because plastic has only been around really for about 100 years. We just know that on a high probability, it can take up to 1,000 years to mineral.
It's old plastic, it's been in the ocean for years, and the sun and the waves have really broken it down into pieces of plastic not much bigger than a grain.
He says the thing about plastic is that wildlife mistakes it for food.
There's plankton, kind of like algae, that start growing on the plastic. So what you get is a green goo mixed with pieces of plastic. So really it is the small pieces that are harmful to the ecosystems and to everything that lives in the ocean.
Plastic. Sea turtles are choking on it. Scientists say that over 60% of whale and dolphin species are affected by it. Zooplankton, the base of the ocean food chain, eat it. And so do we. It's in the water we drink. It's in our food. Microplastics have been found in our salt, our honey, and our beer. And sometimes even in the air we breathe. Companies are choosing to make something that will be used just once, from a material that lasts forever. If you don't like what throwaway plastics are already doing to our world, brace yourself. We face a tsunami of throwaway plastic in our and the ocean's future. 4 times more plastic will be produced between now and the middle of the century than has been produced in all of history. 4 times more.
Ingesting plastic is not the only danger for marine life. Getting entangled in plastic has also become a major threat to many sea animals.
The plastics in our oceans are affecting our marine life in a couple different ways. What you may think of most commonly is entanglement. So animals get caught in debris, and this is usually macro debris, so we're thinking about nets, bags, fishing line.
They also can get stuck in it. Sometimes those plastic pieces have little circles involved and they get stuck, and we call that entanglement. And again, it's not just the sea turtles, it can be a seagull, it can be anything as big as a whale.
I know that the ocean is in deep trouble. The very authoritative prediction shows that by the year 2050, there'll be as much plastic as there is fish in the ocean by weight.
Only a fraction of the plastic that we produce is recycled.
This is never going to degrade. It's got nowhere to go.
This was something that these animals, they were forced to endure because it was man-made and we'd put it into their environment.
The record is 276 pieces of plastic inside of one 90-day-old chick.
If the plastics are in the food chain for the dolphin, they're also in our food chain.
Exactly. Experts call it a global threat.
We've got an ugly, dangerous problem, and we're not fearing it sufficiently.
The UN estimates by 2050 there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Already it holds 5 trillion plastic particles dumped across the world. Americans, for instance, throwing out on average 10 plastic bags a week each. Millions ending up here.
Animals big and small are ingesting those, and how that eventually ends up inside our own bodies. It ultimately is poisoning all of us, the humans, fish.
Almost all of the plastic ever produced is still on Earth. And in the oceans, huge islands of it now, threatening to smother turquoise sea.
Signed up to an initiative to cut plastic pollution in Britain.
Plastic bottles, plastic pollution.
Tackling the scourge of plastic.
We must reduce the demand for plastic.
Coffee cups.
Plastic bottles.
Plastic chopsticks. Everyone has woken up to the need for action.
Even as far away as China, change is happening.
所以我们特地成立了这样一个蓝色星球计划。
Belize is getting rid of styrofoam. And the European Union has mandated reductions for throwaway plastic throughout its 28 member countries.
With the decision against Shell and ExxonMobil's recent election of 2 board members focused on sustainability, there's pressure in the oil market, which is directly creating pressure in the plastic market. And that's at the same time that global governments and retailers and consumers are putting pressure on brands to offer more sustainable solutions in packaging. So in many ways, we're kind of looking at peak plastic right now. The thing is, everything that moves needs a package. And so as you expect, industrial manufacturing partners, energy companies, ag companies, and the largest brands in the world now have a deafening need to move on to something new, and that's what we do here at Zoom. So it's been a great tailwind for us, but it's also great news for the environment.
Do you have anything not wrapped in plastic?
No.
Over the last 10 years, we have produced more plastic than all of the 20th century, according to Plastic Oceans. According to Algalita, an organization that researches how to solve the plastic pollution crisis, we should use alternatives to plastic.
Startups are also developing alternatives to plastic. One startup out of Bali called Avani is working on a biodegradable plastic bag made from cassava root. It's made from such natural materials that their bag is even edible. If a bag like that were to get washed into the ocean, it would not be harmful to sea life at all. And big corporations are finding new ways to reuse ocean plastic.
So that's where consumers really have control over the situation. We're the ones driving it. We're the ones that can stop it.
Think of it this way. Each time you make a decision to skip plastic, you're making a vote for the world you want to create. A world where in our lifetimes, there will no longer be plastic in our oceans.
Every country uses plastic. We need to start rationalizing that. We need to think about reuse of plastic. Single-use plastic has got to be on its way out. And you know, plastic shopping bags are a good example of that. Your family does not need to use them.
Preventing just one of us may seem to be trivial and to have no effect, but the knowledge that there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are doing the same thing, that really does have an effect. So please join us.
Change is possible. It starts with us.
But with your help, we can do more. Together, we can create a movement to reduce throwaway plastic. We can make sure we're all given real plastic-free choices. We can help our cities, towns, schools, and workplaces establish zones that are free of throwaway plastic. Let's stop plastic pollution from wrecking our beaches and our oceans, and have healthy oceans that delight and sustain us for generations to come. Please join our campaign.